Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to a number of things.
I don't know that it's great for my health to be traveling this much.
Past Matt was like, yes, I'll do it. And the future Matt, or now present Matt, is like disappointed.
The way that we value academics versus the investors, the celebrities in the field. It was such a profound difference. He showed Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader making the good side and the dark side of the Force analogy to the people doing real science in the field and the people doing snake oil. It's actually unethical for doctors to use, particularly in care of their clients. He's like, lay down on the gurney. Then he straps me in, literally puts this thing over my head, doesn't tell me anything at all, wheels me into the MRI machine, and then he leaves.
All right, Matt, here we go. It's been a minute. You've been traveling, you've been jet setting. So
yeah, phase one of my 3-month overcommitment to travel is done. And I'm back for 2 days and then I'm off again. So
phase two.
Yeah. I've really packed quite a bit in, and honestly am regretting now a little bit that I committed to so much, but it's all good stuff. I think it's important stuff to do. I just wish I had a little bit more downtime in between. I don't know that it's great for my health to be traveling this much, but
I think of that a lot. It's like past Matt was like, yes, I'll do it. And the future Matt, or now present Matt, is like disappointed. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not disappointed. I feel like everything that I did on this trip went really well. I feel very positive about it. It was valuable. And I think all the stuff that I'm committed to doing over the next 2 months in terms of travel is also valuable and important. And it comes at the expense of being able to spend time here at Optispan in the office, spend time at home with my wife. I'd be lying if I didn't say that I've got a little bit of travel anxiety, I guess, that I'm gone so much, just because I feel like I'm sacrificing other important things. And so my intention is December, off the table. I'm going to be home and I'm going to focus on, the important things and my health, hopefully.
Yeah. No, well, so there's a quote I like, which is every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to a
That's
number
right.
of things. So
Yeah.
by saying yes to travel, you're saying no to seeing your
Yeah.
wife for that period. So
Yeah. Fortunately, Tammy's going to be able to come a little bit here and there on my next extended trip. So we'll have a few days in New York where she'll be able to be there with me, although I'll be doing stuff while I'm there as well. But yeah, it is definitely a sacrifice, and you can't do everything. And I think I need to prioritize maybe a little bit better in the future. Nonetheless, I'm committed and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make the most out of all of the things that I'm going to be doing over the next couple of months.
I guess rapid fire, how was diet, exercise, and sleep?
Yeah, I mean, I think sleep definitely suffered for sure. A diet, pretty good. Again, I feel like I really have gotten to the point where habit-wise, it's just very easy for me to generally make healthier choices. Now, at some of the events, it was like plated meals and things like that. Options were sort of limited. But by and large, I feel like diet, certainly compared to travel in the past, pretty good. Exercise also pretty good. I missed a few days, but in general, I prioritized getting some exercise, did a lot of walking, especially when I was in Berlin as well. And so not as much resistance training as I would have done, had I been home, but overall probably about the same level of activity. And, as we'll get to, one of the stops I made was at the Years Clinic, and they put me through a VO2 max test. And so I got that in as well for the exercise pillar. And then Connect was strong. Like I spent a lot of time with old friends, made some new friends, reconnected with people I haven't really been able to see in person in a few years. So I felt really good about that part of it.
Great. Well, I did a VO2 max while you were gone. Also, we got a new part for the machine. I'm the guinea pig. So I thought it'd be fun. Like, what's funny is we work close together, but I haven't even asked you how your trip went, and we haven't talked about it because I wanted.
Well, I'm just back in the office. Today's I only been here for half an hour. Right?
Yeah, yesterday I wanted to save it for the podcast and kind of get to learn with the audience what you did and some of your sort of key takeaways. Yeah.
So, I mean, let me see if I can remember the exact calendar of events. So I left, today is Thursday morning. I left a week ago Saturday. So 10 or 11 days ago on a flight to Gstaad with a layover at JFK in New York. So that was Saturday morning. I got to Geneva, Switzerland, Sunday morning, local time. Of course, there's all the time zone differences, but the entire time I was gone, I was in Central European time, so 9 hours different from here. And then I rented a car in Geneva and drove to Gstaad, which is about 2.5 hours or so from Geneva. Beautiful countryside, drove around the lake up into the foothills of the Swiss Alps. It was raining by the time I got to Gstaad. It was actually raining the whole time I was there, which is a little bit of a bummer, but I did walk around the town a little bit, got to see a little bit of the town. And that was for the Longevity Investors Conference. So I got there Sunday evening. The conference started Monday morning. And so I participated in a fireside chat on Tuesday at the conference. It was at a beautiful venue, La Grande Bellevue in Gstaad, gorgeous hotel. I had a really nice room that they put me up in. So that was nice. And I got to, interact a lot. So I actually ran into Jamie Justice, who is the executive director of the X Prize Health Span, in the lobby of the hotel when I got there. And so we chatted for a bit. I actually had dinner with her and a friend of mine named Marcelo, who works with a company out of Brazil called Pet More Time. Really interesting company working in the companion animal longevity space. And then started the conference the next day. Actually had a chance to sit down with Jamie and Brad Stanfield, who was also at the Longevity Investors Conference. So we did podcast episodes with each of them. I think they both were great conversations, and hopefully people will enjoy the conversation. We touched on a lot of topics. I think the main take. I had some interesting insights from that meeting. A couple that really stuck with me were, number one, how well the longevity investors treat themselves. It was a really nice venue, really nice hotel. It was particularly striking because my next stop was an academic conference. So the difference in quality of venues, both the hotel rooms and where the conference was held itself, were striking to me. And of course I knew that, but this was like back to back. And so it was like, wow. So anyways, they treat themselves very well. I guess I sort of wonder, of course, the academic scientists are the one doing the work, making the discoveries. Do the benefits accrue commensurate with the contributions? Probably not. But that's one of the things that struck me. Another was, in the session that I had my fireside chat in, two speakers actually both explicitly called out the growing divide between science and snake oil in the field. In fact, one of them, who's an investor from London, not a scientist, actually put up a slide where he showed Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, making like the good side and the dark side of the Force analogy to the people doing real science in the field and the people doing snake oil. I can't really disagree with that sentiment. That was very notable at the conference. It was interesting, though, after that session, I had my fireside chat. I actually kept my fireside chat very positive. I didn't talk much about, the dark side of the field or the individuals. Actually, both speakers called out specific individuals as well, which I thought was interesting. You don't usually see that at these kinds of conferences. But having conversations with people after that, it was interesting because it seemed like people really fell into three camps, right? Some of the people at the conference were very much in that, again, I don't want to say the dark side because I don't know that their intent is bad, but in the group that is prioritizing hype and non-scientific components over legitimate science and medicine in the field. That's one group that was there. Another group was very much aligned with where I think I fall, and the two people who specifically talked about this, who have some concerns about the growing, shift or divide between real science and pseudoscience, and also the what seems to be the growing attention that the pseudoscience is getting, or the snake oil. And then there was the group that I call the apologists, who agree that it's unfortunate that there is a lot of hype and snake oil in the field, but also feel like those individuals tend to get a lot of attention, and that's a good thing for the field, just bringing more eyes to the field. So time will tell whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because my whole point is once you lose trust, you're not going to get it back. But that was sort of the third sentiment that got expressed to me in conversations with people. It's like, yeah, I get it. It's unseemly, but it's a good thing because it gets a lot of attention for the field. So that sort of, stuck with me, especially then going to an academic conference right after that. Especially at the Longevity Investors Conference, there was a much greater, as you might anticipate, signal from the science fiction or snake oil side of the longevity bubble right now.
Okay, so the Longevity Investors Conference, so was that open to the public, or was that a pretty exclusive?
No, I think it was invite only, or investors or others who paid to be there, basically.
Okay, great. Let me think real quick. So the episode's filmed, so we got Jamie Justice and Brad Stanfield. Those will be coming out in the next month or so.
Yeah, and I mean, so for people who don't know much about Jamie, she spent an early part of her career in academia working on human studies, human clinical trials. She was deeply involved in the early phases of TAME, trying to plan that trial, trying to get funding for that trial. So we talked a lot about TAME, some of the things she learned during her time working on TAME with Nir Barzilai and others who were involved, and where that actually project is today, and sort of her thoughts on lessons learned, maybe mistakes made. And then she's now the executive director of the X Prize Health Span, so has worked closely with the X Prize team. She was deeply involved in designing the criteria for the teams that are competing in that X Prize. Talked a lot about, again, what the structure of that prize looks like, why a prize. We actually at the end talked about some of the funniest submissions that they got, which was pretty hilarious. We'll save it for the episode. I don't want to give anything away. So it was just a really interesting conversation. She's super smart, and I'm really pleased that she took that role on, because I think it helped bring some sanity to the X Prize health span that might have been lacking if she hadn't been there. And then Brad, of course, has quite a large YouTube following. He's had a very, very successful YouTube channel for many years. He's a primary care physician in New Zealand who takes a very evidence-based approach to his practice. And so that was a fun conversation. We disagreed on it was friendly disagreement or debate on some areas that I think people will be interested in. Brad is very much of the opinion that doctors should follow the guidelines of the medical organizations, even when, I think many of us would agree that they are more conservative, more reactive than proactive. So we had an interesting conversation about that. I have a better feel for his position. I think I mostly agree with him. I just think that informed doctors should be probably more willing to go against the guidelines. And, one of the interesting conversations we had in this regard was around hormone replacement therapy for women, and how, at least in my opinion, these bodies that come up with guidelines, did a terrible disservice to an entire generation of women and medical providers. And Brad really tried to defend them. So I think it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching that one. Great. Is this the conference where they talked about biological age clocks at all, or?
I mean, biological age clocks came up at both conferences, but yes, there was some discussion around biological age clocks, and we talked about it somewhat in my fireside chat. So that's one of the topics that I got asked about. So I obviously presented my strong belief that these are useful research tools. They have a lot of promise. They don't measure biological age. They are a correlation to biological age, and that medical providers should not be using these in their practice. In fact, I believe this came up with both Jamie and Brad in our podcast episodes as well. And one of the comments, I can't recall whether it was Brad or Jamie, was that it's actually unethical for doctors to use particularly epigenetic age clocks in care of their clients. So I made a pretty strong statement along those lines in my panel discussion. And it was funny because, as is often the case, then somebody tried to say, well, what about the pace of aging clocks? And I had to explain again, okay, we're not communicating here. Pace of aging also measures epigenetic changes. Those epigenetic changes are correlated to changes in health over time, which are correlated to pace of aging or pace of biological aging. It doesn't measure that. And just like the biological age clocks, you don't have any information about precision or accuracy. Medical professionals should not ever, ever, ever be using a test where they don't know anything about precision or accuracy in my book.
Yeah. From the talks, what do you think the future is? Do you think it's a fad that's going to die off? You think it's going to evolve into something
You mean the biological age clocks?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it will definitely be useful in the future. And I think most people in the space believe that these things hold promise. Again, I think how long it will take to get to the point where we have clinically validated epigenetic clocks is unclear. I mean, we could do it now. Like there's no barrier to having clinically validated epigenetic algorithms that are estimators of mortality risk or disease risk or organ function or change in health status over time. The problem is the incentives are all aligned for direct-to-consumer companies to rush these to market, which is giving the entire space a bad reputation, and is slowing down actually the clinical validation of these tools. But there's no reason that a legitimate company, somebody like LabCorp or Quest, couldn't adopt these tools, clinically validate them, get quantitative estimates of precision and accuracy, so that anybody who wants to use them actually knows what the error rates are and what the tests mean. Once we have those, then I think it opens up possibilities for lots of uses. They're still not as clinically actionable as some of the other things that we measure, say from blood, like insulin or glucose or lipids, right? But they become more useful, and particularly for predicting, say, early organ dysfunction, that then you could use as a screening tool to inform follow-up diagnostics. I see that as a very low-hanging fruit. That could be done now. It requires somebody responsible to actually clinically validate the test, and I just don't see the direct-to-consumer companies doing that, unfortunately.
Because they don't have an incentive for it?
Yeah, I mean, they don't need to. They can sell things that don't work.
Yeah. And of all these type of tests, the one that you're believing the most is lineage. Is that correct?
Right now, so if you look at the existing quote-unquote biological age tests, right? Again, they're all estimators, I guess, of biological age is the best way to say it. I think Lineage 2 is the best one that's out there right now. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, it's ballpark as good as the best epigenetic clocks at correlating to mortality risk, which is something we care about. Your risk of dying is something we care about. And it uses clinically relevant features. So things that we can get from a blood test that we know what they mean, and we know how to move them in the direction that should be associated with lower mortality risk. A urinalysis as well. So blood test and urinalysis. So again, things like, lipid particle size or white blood cell parameters or insulin levels, things like that, where we know what they mean from a physiological perspective, and we have tools to move them in the direction that the Lineage test predicts should reduce mortality at the individual level. That's the real power of these things like Lineage, is you can apply this to an individual's biomarkers at a snapshot in time, tells you something about them that's unique to them, and gives you actionable information in the case of Lineage 2 to theoretically reduce their mortality risk.
And then you could retest it and see what direction you're going.
That's right. Yeah.
Great. Anything else from Longevity Investor Conference? Any sort of big takeaways or things you want to implement maybe at Optispan?
Not really. I mean, I think it was nice to see the enthusiasm, again, at least among, one of the buckets of people that were there, for very evidence-based approaches in the clinical space. I think, there are lots of people who recognize how important it is to bring evidence-based, science-based, personalized health optimization, health span optimization to as many people as we can. Right now, there are, again, in my opinion, very, very few groups that are really doing this to the best that they can in a responsible way. And I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for Optispan and our approach. And so it was good to meet people there. Again, right now, I mean, as you know, our audience may not know this, we are working exclusively in the United States on at least our clinical programs. But I think our technology development components will be applicable internationally. And so it was great to make connections with people who are interested in perhaps working with us on international use of our platform and our technologies as we get those ready to roll out.
I saw a similarity I want to run by you and get your opinion on. So obviously I come up from the sort of exercise science gym world, and you have all these gym bros who are essentially lab mice, and they're testing out, whether it be different sort of diets, different training modalities, drop sets, all these different things. And then over time, it's this natural evolution. What works gets spread, and eventually gets studies behind it. Right. And sometimes you have a gym practitioner who's 20 years ahead of the actual studies, and it worked. Yeah. And I feel like people want to say that's also happening in geroscience, where you have these sort of biohackers who are trying things ahead of the science. Yeah. But it just seems like maybe higher risk.
So a couple thoughts there. I think one of the reasons why, I mean, there's going to be some truth to that, right? Some of the people who are trying things are going to hit on things that work. I mean, whatever work means, but let's just say that means health improvement or health optimization in this case. Most people are not. Most people are going to do harm to themselves, which is probably true in the gym bro world of 30 years ago. Maybe not. I think the big difference though is in that culture, what works is what makes you bigger, stronger, right? Or if you're competing in bodybuilding competitions, what gives you the highest likelihood of winning, right? In this, and so it's obvious within a short period of time whether something works or not in that for that goal. In this context, it's not, and that allows dishonest people, misinformed people to gain traction and followings where they then propagate the misinformation, because it's really hard to prove what works and what doesn't work, especially when people are using tests selectively that we now know are flawed is the nicest way to say it, right? Really not giving any useful information at this point. But they're dishonestly and selectively using those tests to say, oh, well, I've reversed my aging by 10 years or 20 years, right? Which is just bullshit. So it's a more challenging space because it's harder to demonstrate what's working and what's not working in that self-experimentation realm. Again, that's why we really need more validated metrics so we can actually know what's working and what's not working. I think the other thing is, there may be differences of goals among the various groups who are sort of in the longevity bubble right now. I mean, obviously there's one group that's just about making money and profiting, right? Just set those folks aside. But even within the people who are genuinely trying to move for the field forward, there's the pure scientists who are in their labs doing the science, not really paying a lot of attention to what's going on. That was another thing we can talk about that I was struck by at the academic conference I was at, is that the disconnect still between the academic scientists and the rest of the bubble. So there's the scientists. There are the sort of, I guess I would say, group of people who really are all about maximizing health span, right? And those fall into a couple of groups. Those are, middle-aged people who, recognize that now is the time that they need to take control of their health if they want to be able to function the way they want to function for the next 30 years, right? And then there are the younger sort of biohacker, true hardcore biohackers who are trying to optimize their parameters. And then there's the group that want to live forever, right? They believe in longevity, escape velocity. They believe that we're close and they want to live forever. I think many of those people have a profound fear of death, which I would say from a mental health perspective is not great, but that's a real thing as well. So my point being, I'm not even sure that everybody's trying to accomplish the same in fact, I know people aren't trying to accomplish the same things within this space. I think probably the goals were maybe more aligned in the gym bro culture, experimental culture. So there are similarities for sure, but I think it's very different in the sense that we don't have any way to really know what's working, what's not working. A lot more cult of personality in the longevity space right now, as opposed to scientific fact, I think.
Yeah, no, well said. It makes sense in like the gym culture world. Like blood flow restriction was popular before there's any studies on it. The studies have showed that it works. So as an example, something that kind of survived the evolution. But the feedback loop is so small where you could test within a few months. Where if I say the supplement will make you live till 120, by the time you realize it was a fraud, I'm already out and rich, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's exactly the situation. And I think, we'll look back 20 years from now, maybe sooner than that, hopefully sooner than that. And we'll say, yeah, some of the stuff did work. Again, if I had to put a bet on it, it will be things like rapamycin or SGLT2 inhibitors or therapeutic plasma exchange, maybe some of the stem cell or exosome therapies once we get it cleaned up, like what's actually happening there. And that's sort of a catch-all for a bunch of different stuff. Maybe some peptides, certainly not all. We will look back and say, yeah, some of this stuff had real value. Most of it didn't, but it's going to be a longer time frame before we know that. And also before we know what the risks are. That's maybe one additional thing that's worth saying. I think in the gym bro experimental culture, 20 years ago or more, the health risks, it's interesting to ask, like, were the health risks for a lot of what they were doing more significant than the health risks that people in the longevity space are doing now? I actually don't know. I mean, my gut reaction was, yeah, it probably was with a lot of the synthetic anabolic steroids and things like that. But I don't think we actually know what the long-term risks are of some of the stuff that people are doing in the longevity space. Certainly some of the things that people are doing carry pretty significant risks of at least acute severe outcomes or even death. I would put some of the gene therapies in that category just because of some of the stories that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not to go down this rabbit hole, but at a highest level, like the Olympia, Arnold Schwarzenegger's still alive. A lot of his peers still alive.
And he's in reasonably good shape. Like, it seems like his health is not terrible for his age.
Exactly.
Right?
The dosage has gone higher, the insulin, the growth hormone, other things. So it's actually at a highest level, gotten a lot less safe over the last 50 years.
Right. You're talking about the competitive.
The competitive gym world, So, bodybuilding. Okay, so that was that conference. And then after that, where'd you head to?
Yeah, so I left Gstaad Wednesday morning early to go to the GJAM Conference in Jena, Germany. So that stands for Groningen Jena Longevity Conference or Aging Conference. I can't remember. Sorry, guys, I can't remember. So that's a pure academic conference, and it goes back and forth between those two cities, at least for the last few years. So that was an interesting full day travel. It's not easy to get from Gstaad, Switzerland to Jena, Germany. So I had a rental car. I mentioned I drove from Gstaad to Basel. I was able to catch a direct train from Basel to Frankfurt, about a 4-hour train ride, and then rented a car in Frankfurt and drove to Jena, which I feel like was another 3 or 4 hours. So probably all in all, I mean, with stops to go to the bathroom and things like that, it probably took me 12 hours total to get from door to door. One thing that I have found that I actually did on both the drive to Gstaad and then on the drive from Frankfurt to Jena is I've gotten really good at taking like 10 or 15 minute power naps in the car. So I get tired. That's one nice thing about the European expressways is they have lots of parking rest stops and things like that. So I pull over, take a 15-minute power nap, and then I'm good to go. The other thing, of course, that's a little bit different in at least Switzerland and Germany is you have to pay to go to the bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
Which is fine. All of them, I didn't have any cash or coins or anything. All of them take credit cards, although when the credit card machine doesn't work, that can be frustrating when you need to use the restroom. But the restrooms are generally cleaner, so I guess that's one upside to paying to use the public restrooms. Anyways, I got to Jena about 6 p.m. I guess that was Wednesday. I was staying at the Hotel Schwarzer Bear, which is Black Bear, which I thought was appropriate given my recent bear adventures. So I got there. Really nice people at the hotel, working at the hotel. They were great. And they told me that I had to pet the bear for good luck. So I got down and petted. They had a statue of a bear on the ground, so that was fun. And then the conference had already started by the time I got there. But then the next 2 days, Thursday, Friday, I was at the GJAM conference. I gave a talk on Thursday and then participated in a panel discussion on Friday. The panel discussion was about translating geroscience. And so it was really interesting. It had, I think there were 4 panelists, a couple of folks in the venture capital world, one who was a cardiologist and one who was a scientist, and myself. So lots of diverse perspectives, and that was an interesting conversation. Again, the big takeaways for me that I sort of thought about for a little bit after the conference. One was how dramatically different the sort of environment, quality of the hotel, quality of the venue. Not that the venue in Jena was bad; it was just a much lower tier than in Gstaad. The hotel was very Spartan, and so yeah, it just kind of struck me. The way that the difference in the way that we value academics versus the investors, the celebrities in the field. You know what I mean? It is what it is. And again, I've known it, but this just really struck me because it was back to back, and it was such a profound difference. But, people may not realize this, but, at these medical or investor conferences, like everybody's flying business class, best accommodations. Academics, the institutions won't allow them to cover anything but the cheapest economy ticket, can't stay in a nice hotel. So it's just a very different world. And academics in some ways allow themselves, I think, to be undercompensated for the value that they bring. But that's just the situation. So that kind of stuck with me. The other big takeaway, well, there were 2. One, it was great to be back in a pure academic conference. I really enjoyed just hearing science. I was a little, and again, this is not meant in a critical or negative way. I was a little surprised at how similar the talks were to what they were 2 years ago, 5 years ago, even pre-pandemic. Some of the people who were there working on exactly the same projects they were working on, in 2019, right? Not, again, that's the pace of science sometimes, and some of these are big projects, but compared to other aspects of the field, how slow moving the science is sometimes. That's the way it felt at least. And particularly in terms of the way people are thinking about their science and what it means outside of the laboratory. That really struck me, mostly probably because I have been now in a different world, right? Where that's all I do is think about how do we bring this out of the lab into the real world? What's pragmatic? What's practical? What are the friction points that keep us from doing that? When I was purely in academia, I wasn't thinking very much about that at all. And so being back in that world, talking to people in that world who are friends of mine, many of them, again, it just struck me the change in perspective you have when when you think about things through a different lens. And so I realized I have been thinking about things differently. And then the last thing was, one of the questions I asked in the panel discussion session of the audience was, how many of you have used experimental therapies? And only like 3 hands. And there were probably 200 or 300 people there. Only like 3 hands went up. If I did that at any other longevity conference, it'd be like, half the audience, right? So that to me was interesting, how the academic world is still very much removed, at least in their own heads, from the biohacker, the clinical longevity clinics, things like that. Of course, when I then said after that, when only 3 hands went up, I said, well, how many of you take supplements? And then probably like maybe a quarter of the people in the room raised their hands. I'm like, hate to tell it to you, but you're doing experimental therapies. But, in their own heads, at least, how removed they are from the people who are actually out there in the real world doing stuff, right? So it, again, pointed out to me a fairly substantial divide between the pure academics and the clinicians, the biohackers, the business people who are out in the market trying to bring these things to the real world.
Would you call it almost like a spectrum of pure academic to Dave Asprey biohacker? I don't want to do it. I don't want to call it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a continuous spectrum, right? In the sense that I don't think everybody, I certainly don't even know that I certainly would not put myself like somewhere linearly between a pure academic and Dave Asprey, right? So, but yes, I mean, there are probably, maybe it's like a multidimensional, yeah. In some ways, you could make a linear extrapolation from a very, very conservative academic who is not doing anything, from a healthy lifestyle perspective for themselves, not really interested in translating anything, just wants to do the basic science, to somebody who is really, really out there, and Brian Johnson, let's just say, right? Let's just assume Brian Johnson really means what he says and he really is trying to optimize his health, which I'm not sure is true, but let's just assume it is. Then, yeah, you could say I'm somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but there are multiple other dimensions of scientific rigor and, how motivated you are by profit or, self-aggrandizement, like all of that kind of plays into a lot of the motivations that people have.
Totally. Did you feel the need to make your talk more practical to kind of offset some of the...
No, because I was giving a talk on mostly on the dog aging project. And so that I could keep pretty scientific and talk to a scientific audience. I would say, my talk was less data driven and mechanistic than some of the talks, but that has more to do with the nature of the science than of the my desire to give a deep mechanistic dive, although I'm honestly less interested in that these days.
Yeah. So obviously you're familiar with like my level of knowledge in this field. Do you think if I was there, I could follow along with most of the talks, or is it like way over the average person's head?
You would follow some of it, right? A lot of it, yeah, probably not, right? Again, because in every academic field, there is their own language, right? Words that you're not going to know what they mean, and so obviously it becomes hard to follow. Anybody who gives a good talk, which is not the majority of academic scientists, I would say, sometimes, tries to make their talk accessible at some level to everyone so that everybody can get the main take-homes. And then you're going to lose people when you really get into a lot of the details with some of the, because again, mostly because some of the words, are not in the common vernacular. And if you're not a scientist or you're not in that field, you're not going to get it. But you should still be able to get the concepts, even if you can't get the details. That's what makes a good talk, in my view.
Yeah. So that's why it's important for them to know their audience. If you're talking to academics, use the language. If you're talking to a broader audience, yeah, that makes sense. One comparison that you made me think of, which might not be true, but it almost reminds me of like men versus women's professional sports and that sort of argument around pay. And is it a matter of just money coming in, where the first conference has just more money so they can do more with it?
Yeah. I mean, well, there's also the culture, right? Again, in academia, there are all these bureaucratic rules that prohibit expenses being used for anything other than basically the cheapest level that you can get by with, right? And that doesn't exist in the private sector. And again, I understand why those rules were, have over the years been put in place. It's because of a perception that academics are solely funded by public money, and we should not be wasting public money on, business class tickets or fancy hotel rooms, and that academics are all just out there partying instead of doing work. Unfortunately, I think the people who believe that don't really have any understanding of what academics actually do and how hard they work and what they contribute. So I'm not saying that the people in the private sector shouldn't have access to fancy stuff. What I guess I would say is, in my opinion, the scientists who are actually doing the work and making the discoveries work, frankly, a lot harder than a lot of the people in the private sector. And are contributing a lot and should be treated better in my view, or shouldn't have at least these arbitrary rules that you have to, default to the cheapest common denominator, right? And you're required to.
I see. Do you think it's just like a marketing problem? Like the loud people are just better at marketing themselves?
I think it's, I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's, again, I think it really comes down to largely perception, the perception that academics are, getting paid off the public dime. Because it is true, most academic science is funded by public funds. What, of course, is lost in that perception is the great value that is returned to society from the use of those public funds by the discoveries made by the academics. And certainly the private sector plays a role in translating those discoveries, also returning value to the public sector. In my opinion, it's in general, probably a less efficient use of resources, though, going from the discoveries to translation. Again, that's not the private sector's fault necessarily. There's lots of complications. I don't want to demonize anyone at all. All I'm saying is it struck me how different the way the private sector treats itself to the way that academics get treated.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And you know what? I mean, again, I'm not complaining for myself because I'm not in that academic world anymore, right? This is just that was my response to what I saw.
Okay. Yeah. This is a half-baked thought, somewhat related, but when I first got into this field, I got into the most popular, the most famous, I would say, geroscientists. And then as I learned more, I got more into like unity and I kind of switched to other people. Yeah. And it made me wonder that if every field has that, if the most vocal person isn't always the best person.
Probably. Although, yeah, probably. Again, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe not that useful.
I mean,
but...
again, I touched on this a little bit. There is this longevity celebrity phenomenon, which is what I was alluding to among what I call the apologists in the field, right? The idea that celebrity itself is valuable to the field, even if it comes from dishonest behavior by the celebrity. It's valuable to the field because it draws eyes to the field that wouldn't otherwise be drawn there.
Oh yeah, the whole idea is like it raises all boats, ideally.
That's what I view as the ends justifies the means philosophy. Yes, I'm honestly not sure it does that. Right. Well, certainly more attention has been drawn to the field. I also know that some of that attention is in the form of people who are convinced that everybody in the field's a charlatan and it's all made up snake oil. And unfortunately, the people I've talked to who maybe that's an overstatement of their opinion, but the only thing they might know about the field is a particular academic scientist who has a track record of charlatanism and a guy who injects blood from his son. And they think both of them are snake oil salesmen.
Okay. So then they think the entire spectrum is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these are serious people. And my entire perspective has been serious people expect serious behavior. And if you act in an unserious way, they are not going to take you seriously and they are not going to invest in you. Now, having said that, both of those people have been successful at raising money. So what do I know?
All right. Anything else from your travels you want to touch on? Or?
Yeah. So then I left Jena. What day is that now? Friday night? No, Friday around noon. So after my panel was done, it was about 2, and drove to Berlin. And then while I was in Berlin, I met up with Andrew Steele, who wrote the book Ageless, great guy. We sat down and recorded, again, I think a really interesting podcast episode. And then Andrew was nice enough to show me a couple sites in Berlin, and I wandered around the central part of Berlin Saturday evening, and then met up with Jan Hennigs from the Years Clinic in Berlin for a podcast episode. Jan is the medical director of Years, and then Alex is their lead doctor. So the three of us had a podcast recording at the clinic. And then I went back on Monday and went through their entire program, which was really interesting. And I learned, similarities with what we're doing at Optispan, some differences, which we'll talk about, internally. I think they do some things that we don't do. I think we do some things a lot. We're further ahead in some areas, but it's a great opportunity to sort of share information. The nice thing about Jan and Alex is they are both completely committed to rigorous science, evidence-based approaches, really doing the clinical application of geroscience and health optimization right. In fact, we talked a bit in the podcast. They use the term, I think, scientific health span is the way they refer to their program rather than longevity medicine, because they have the perception, much like we've discussed, that phrase longevity medicine has already been corrupted or co-opted and has a bad reputation. In fact, that was another thing I asked people at the Longevity Investors Conferences. When you hear longevity medicine, what do you think? How does that make you feel? And universally, everybody was like, ugh. So unfortunately, I think even within the longevity bubble, people are becoming wary of that phrase, which I think just goes to show that some of the people who call themselves longevity doctors or some of the marketing around longevity medicine just has a bad connotation to it, unfortunately. So anyways, went through their program. One funny story from that. So one of the components of their program, much like our Helix program, is whole body MRI. But it's not done at their clinic. It's done at a radiology clinic nearby. And so after I went through this entire day, I mentioned I did VO2 max, among a bunch of other stuff. I walked over to the MRI clinic, and they spoke enough English that I could communicate, right? I mean, it's Germany. Most people, professionals, speak English. But, I only had to wait for like 15 minutes, and then they brought me into the changing room. The technician or nurse asked me, if I had any metal on my body. I said no. Told me to take off my Apple Watch, which I did. And then he there's a gurney there, and he's like, lay down on the gurney. And so I did. And then he straps me in. Literally, my arms are by my side. I'm strapped in, right? I mean, I guess I probably could have broken out, but I was restrained. Puts this thing over my head. Doesn't tell me anything at all. Just does all this stuff, right? Doesn't say anything to me. Wheels me into the MRI machine. He's like, it'll take about an hour, and then he leaves. And fortunately, I'd had a whole body MRI before, or I would have been like, oh my God, what's happening, right? Because if you have any sort of anxiety around the procedure or claustrophobia, they didn't ask any of that. They just stuck me right in the machine, didn't tell me anything. And then, about 10 minutes in, so I fell asleep, which, that's fine. They didn't play any music or anything, which was disappointing, but I fell asleep in the machine, and then it starts talking to me in German. I have no idea what it was saying. My only guess is that there's one part where you're doing the MRI where it's telling you to inhale, hold your breath, and exhale. So I guessed that's what it was telling me, but I don't know.
Yeah. Did you do it just in
Yeah,
case?
I did.
Yeah.
So I found that interesting how not atypical with healthcare systems that customer service is lacking, but it was it would have been very anxiety provoking. It was a little bit anxiety provoking on its own, but it would have been very anxiety provoking if I hadn't had an MRI before.
Yeah. I mean, vendors are hard to have quality control. I'm not sure if it's a vendor or a partner, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
It's just, it gets
I'm
tough,
not sure.
right?
Yeah. So it was an experience. And then I flew home Tuesday.
Okay. All right. And today's Thursday morning.
Yep.
So I just got back pretty recently.
Yep.
What was your VO2 max?
49.7, I think.
Really? That's good.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it was using a bike. So he said, you don't typically train on a bike. So I mean, I don't know if it's true. This is what Alex said to me. It's like your VO2 max is probably like 53, 54. But
yeah. 49 on a bike is like really good because you don't do, unless you're like, again, mainly training on the bikes.
I pushed myself hard. Like, I mean, you and I know that when I did it the first time here, I was like, oh, I could have kept going. I pushed myself pretty close. My max or my heart rate got up to 184, and they had like a full, chest monitor. They had leads on me, did the full thing. So
you're 54, right?
Yeah.
So your theoretical heart rate max is 166. You got 184. That's an 18 difference. That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this isn't accurate, but one way to think about it is like your heart could be 18 years younger than what is hypothetically assumed.
I actually was pretty surprised that I performed that well on the VO2 max, partly because I haven't really been training for VO2 max at all. Although just, within the last month or so, I have started trying once a week to do stairs again. And so that's been actually felt really good. But I didn't expect to do that well, especially with all the traveling and everything. But yeah, I was pleased by that.
I mean, I'm 34. I did a VO2 max and got 49.0. So that's why I'm a little annoyed because you beat me. But
there's still time,
yeah.
I guarantee you there will come a time when you will get ahead of me as I continue to age. Well, I guess I shouldn't guarantee you. Maybe not. Maybe I'll just keep going. Right?
You don't know. That's one thing I heard at TSA is like, how long can I keep my VO2 max number above my age? Because at a certain point, your age goes up each year.
Yeah, mine wasn't, right?
Yeah. I think that's good goal, though. Okay, so any other cool data you collected? DEXA scans,
Yeah,
blood
so I
work?
mean, did a lot of blood work, ultrasound. So we do both of those at Optispan. Um, uh, they actually had a lung capacity machine. I don't know how I did. I haven't seen that. Eye test, hearing test. I haven't done the cognitive assessments yet. Those are on the computer. So very similar to the kinds of things that we measure in our programs. The one thing I thought was interesting was they can't do DEXA. So what I was told is in Germany, you're not allowed to use any radiation for a preventative or screening procedure. Even though the amount of radiation you get from a DEXA is less than, a flight from, I don't know, Berlin to Amsterdam, right? So it's kind of an absurd regulation. And I asked, well, what about dental x-rays? And the same thing. Once you have a cavity or a problem, they can do x-rays, but they can't do it for screening or preventative purposes. So I don't know for sure if that's true, but I'm assuming it is, because the people who told me would know. That's why they couldn't do DEXA. So, if that's really the case, Berlin or Germany, you guys need to get your act together. Like, that's absurd. You're harming people with stupid regulations based on outdated information about radiation exposure. Interesting. So no, couldn't do a DEXA.
Is there almost like a way they could write, like if you had, never mind, I can't.
Yeah, you're thinking if so, what they. So yeah, I think what you're thinking is if they faked like a prescription reason why you needed the radiation.
You could almost find one for anybody, I'd assume.
Well, you could ask what if the person, or you could ask, like, what would be a good reason why somebody would get a DEXA in Germany then?
Yeah. Could they just say, I feel like my bones are weak? Could we? I don't know.
Yeah, no. Oh, well, so that's one thing they did do. They did do an ultrasound bone density measurement, which was way off. The only reason I know it's way off is because I've had multiple DEXAs, right? So based on their ultrasound bone density measurement, it said I was minus 0.5 T-score when I know I'm like 2 standard deviations or 3 standard deviations above the mean by DEXA everywhere in my body, pretty much, especially my head.
Yeah.
So the ultrasound method is not very good, or not very accurate, I guess I would say. And they used impedance for body composition.
Like in-body type thing, or?
Yeah, it was basically the same as the in-body that we've got here. Yeah. It said my body fat was 14.6. That's ballpark, probably close. So, hard to know, but overall, yeah, that was one area that I think there would be a benefit if they were allowed to do DEXA for sure. And, if somebody comes in and you suspect they have osteoporosis or osteopenia, you can prescribe a DEXA at that point. You just can't use it for preventative care.
I see. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Anything else? Travels?
Nope. Glad to be home. Wish I wasn't leaving Saturday morning. But it is what it is. So I'm off to Singapore for National University Singapore Scientific Advisory Board. I'll see Brian Kennedy while I'm there. I assume I'll see Jan Gruber and Peter Fedichev and hopefully get to see the clinic that's there and learn from what they're doing in Singapore. And then from there, I go to New York for a few days, participating in a life sciences conference in New York, giving a longevity TEDx talk in Boston the Tuesday after that. Then I'm in the Canadian Translational Geroscience meeting in Toronto Thursday, Friday after that. And then I'll be doing the No Bad Dogs podcast in Albany over the weekend. And then I'm coming home.
Great. Well, people like this, we can do a part 2 when you get back from your second round.
Yeah.
Great. Well, the TEDx, will that be posted on YouTube, do you know?
I don't know. Okay. I think it will, actually. I think the last one, they're all on YouTube now. So yeah, it probably will be up on YouTube. Yeah. I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to talk about there. So we'll see.
There we go. Get on it. All right, Matt. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Yep. It's good to be back. Good to see everyone.